you have always believed that your death lies somewhere ahead of you, out in a future that has not happened yet, waiting in the dark to arrive. Everyone you have ever known believes the same thing. But here is what almost nobody is told. According to the same physics that runs the satellite navigation in your pocket, the future is not an empty space waiting to be filled. It already exists. Einstein showed, more than 100 years ago, that there is no single universal moment we all call now, that two people standing in the same spot can disagree about what is happening right now in a distant galaxy, and both be correct. And once the universal now dissolves, something follows that is almost impossible to hold in your head. The moment of your death is not coming toward you. It is already there, fixed in place, as real as this one. Get comfortable. Hit subscribe if you're new here, because by the end of this, the future will never feel empty again, and your own ending may stop looking like something chasing you through the dark. Now, let's slowly ease into this. Part 1. The certainty you never question. There is one belief you hold so completely that you have probably never once thought to examine it. You believe that this moment, the one you are in right now, is special. You believe that the past is gone, finished, closed behind you like a door, and that the future has not happened yet, that it is open, unwritten, waiting somewhere ahead of you to arrive. You believe that you are moving through time the way a boat moves down a river, carried forward at a steady and unstoppable pace from a present that is real toward a future that is not yet real, and away from a past that has stopped being real. You believe, in other words, that time flows. You did not arrive at this belief by reasoning your way to it. Nobody sat you down and proved it to you. It came built in, the way the feeling of solid ground came built in, the way the difference between up and down came built in. It is so close to you that it is almost invisible, the lens you look through rather than the thing you look at. And because it is invisible, it has never had to defend itself. Every other thing you believe has at some point been questioned, tested, argued over. This one has simply been assumed, quietly, underneath everything else, every single day of your life. The strange thing, the thing this video is going to spend the next couple of hours sitting with, is that physics does not share your certainty. The deeper physicists have looked into the structure of time, the less they have found of the thing you feel so surely. They have looked for the flow, the movement, the passage, the special glowing present moment that separates what is real from what is not yet real. And in the fundamental equations that describe how the universe actually works, they have not found it. The flow is not there. The moving now is not there. The line between past and future that feels so absolute to you does not appear anywhere in the laws. I want to be careful here, because this is not a video designed to frighten you. It would be easy to take an idea like this and make it into something cold, something that strips the meaning out of your life and leaves you staring at a clockwork universe that does not care whether you exist. That is not where we are going. The honest version of this idea is stranger and, in the end, gentler than that. But to get there, we have to follow the physics where it leads, slowly and patiently, one step at a time, and the first step is simply to notice that the river you have always assumed you were floating down may not be moving at all. Consider how the river feels from the inside. Right now feels like the only time that is truly happening. A minute ago feels like a memory, something you can recall but not return to. A minute from now feels like a possibility, something you can imagine but not yet touch. There is a sharp, bright edge to the present, a sense that this instant is where reality is actually occurring, and that everything else is either a recording or a forecast. That edge is the most convincing thing in your entire experience. You would stake almost anything on it being real. And yet here is a small first crack, one we will widen carefully as we go. The sharp, bright edge of now that you are so sure of, that you feel pressing against you at this very second, is something no instrument has ever managed to detect. Clocks do not measure it. They measure intervals, the distance between one tick and another, but they do not register a special moment that is lit up as the present, while the others sit in darkness. Physics has equations for how fast clocks run, for how time stretches and compresses, for how it bends near heavy objects. It has no equation, anywhere, for the flow. The passage of time, the thing you are most certain of, leaves no fingerprint on the physical world at all. There is a reason that should unsettle you, at least a little, before it begins to comfort you. We usually trust the feelings that are most universal and most insistent. The feeling that time passes is about as universal and insistent as a feeling can get. Every human being who has ever lived has felt it. It seems impossible that something so total could be, in some sense, a story the mind is telling rather than a fact about the universe. But the history of physics is, in large part, the history of exactly that kind of discovery, the discovery that the most obvious features of experience are not always features of reality. People once knew, with total certainty, that the earth stood still and the heavens turned around it. They could feel it. The ground did not move. The sun rose and set. Nothing in ordinary experience suggested that the planet beneath their feet was spinning at hundreds of meters per second and racing around the sun at 30 kilometers per second. The certainty was complete, and the certainty was wrong, not because people were foolish, but because the truth was hidden underneath an appearance that felt like bedrock. The flow of time may turn out to be the same kind of thing, a feeling so close to us that we mistook it for the world. Notice that I keep saying may. I am not going to tell you that physics has proven the flow of time is an illusion, because it has not proven that, and anyone who tells you it is settled is overselling it. What physics has done is harder to hold and more interesting. It has quietly removed every place where the flow could be hiding. It has built a picture of reality, tested that picture to extraordinary precision, and in that tested picture there is no need for a moving present and no room for one either. The flow has not been disproven so much as it has been left without a job to do. Notice how completely the flow has soaked into the way we speak, because the language gives the assumption away. We say that time passes, that it flows, that it marches on, that it slips through our fingers and runs out and flies when we are enjoying ourselves. We speak of the present moment arriving, and of the past slipping behind us, and of the future bearing down. Every one of these phrases smuggles in the same picture, a moving now, a current, a direction of travel. We did not invent this language after carefully studying time. We inherited it from the same built-in feeling that tells you the present is special, and then the language fed the feeling back to us, generation after generation, until it became impossible to talk about time at all without assuming it moves. When a belief is baked into the grammar of every sentence you can form about a subject, it becomes very hard to even ask whether the belief is true, because the question itself comes out sounding like nonsense. Consider how strange it would sound to say that time does not pass. It sounds almost like a contradiction, like saying that water is not wet or that up is not above. And yet that reaction, that immediate sense of absurdity, is not evidence that the flow is real. It is only evidence that the assumption is total. The people who knew the earth stood still would have heard the claim that the ground races through space at 30 kilometers per second as exactly the same kind of absurdity, a claim that contradicts the most obvious fact in the world. They were not stupid. They were standing inside an appearance so complete that the truth sounded like madness. We may be standing inside the same kind of appearance about time, so close to it that the moment anyone suggests the river is not moving, every instinct we have rises up to call it impossible. The task tonight is to set that instinct gently aside, Not because instincts are worthless, but because on this one particular question, the instinct may be reporting the architecture of the mind rather than the architecture of the world. Think of the river one more time, because we are going to keep coming back to it. You have always pictured time as a river, with you on a small boat being carried along its current, the water flowing past you from the future into the past. Hold that image, because the question this entire video is built around is deceptively simple. Is the river actually moving? Or is the river standing perfectly still, frozen from end to end, and the only thing moving is the boat, and maybe, just maybe, not even the boat, but only the small travelling light of your attention sliding along a river that never flowed at all? By the end of tonight, that question is going to have a name, and the name is the block universe. We are going to build it carefully, brick by brick, out of the most well-established physics there is. And somewhere along the way, the abstract question about rivers and time is going to turn personal, because if the river is not moving, if every part of it already exists, then so does every moment of your life, including the last one. The moment of your death, in that picture, is not ahead of you waiting to happen. It is already there. But we are getting ahead of ourselves. For now, all I am asking you to do is to loosen your grip just slightly on the one belief you have never questioned, and to let the possibility in that the flow of time, the most certain thing you know, might be the one thing about the universe you have always had backwards. Part 2. You are already living in the past. Let us begin the loosening with something that sounds dramatic, but is simply, plainly true. You have never once seen the present, not a single time in your entire life. Everything you have ever looked at, you have seen as it was in the past, and you always will. This is not philosophy, and it is not a trick of words. It is a direct consequence of the fact that light, fast as it is, does not travel instantly. It takes time to cross the space between a thing and your eye, and during that time, however small, the thing moves on, ages, changes. By the moment the light arrives, the present it came from is already gone. Step outside tonight and look up, and you can see this with your own eyes if you know what you are looking at. The moon, when it is up, is a little more than 1 light second away, which means you are seeing it as it was about 1 1/3 seconds ago. If something were to happen on the moon right now, you would not know for well over a second. The sun, which we will not look at directly but which is there behind the horizon, is 8 minutes and 20 seconds away at the speed of light. The sunlight warming your face left the surface of the sun more than 8 minutes ago. If the sun simply vanished, you would carry on in full daylight for over 8 minutes, with no warning, no flicker, the sky bright and ordinary above a sun that was already gone. Now, lift your eyes past the sun, out to the stars, and the delay stretches from minutes into years and then into something far larger. The bright stars of the night sky are tens, hundreds, sometimes thousands of years in the past by the time their light reaches you. When you look at a star 400 light years away, you are seeing light that left it 400 years ago, around the time the first telescopes were being built. The star you are looking at may not even exist anymore. It might have died centuries before you were born, and its light is still arriving, still painting a point on your retina, a portrait of something that is no longer there. Push all the way out to the faint smudge of the Andromeda Galaxy, the most distant thing the unaided human eye can see, and the number becomes genuinely difficult to hold. That smudge is about 2.5 million light years away. The light entering your eye from Andromeda tonight left it 2.5 million years ago, long before there were modern humans to look up at it. You are not seeing Andromeda. You are seeing a 2.5 million year old photograph of Andromeda delivered tonight, and there is no other version available to you. The real, current Andromeda, whatever it looks like now, is permanently out of reach, hidden behind the time it takes light to cross the gap. Hold all of this together, and look up again, and the night sky becomes something other than a flat ceiling of points. It becomes a layered photograph of different pasts, all arriving at the same instant. The moon a second ago, the sun 8 minutes ago, one star a decade back, another 1,000 years back, the Andromeda smudge 2.5 million years back. Every layer a different depth of history, stacked on top of each other, reaching your eye together in a single, quiet moment of looking. You are standing at the bottom of an ocean of old light, and every part of the sky is showing you a time that has already ended. This applies to everything, not just the sky. The face of the person across the table from you, you see, as it was a few billionths of a second ago, the time it takes light to cross the space between you. Your own face in the mirror is slightly behind, never quite caught up. The screen you may be glancing at, the walls of the room, the horizon outside, all of it reaches you delayed. All of it is a record of a present that has already moved on. There is no setting in which you perceive the world as it is right now. You perceive the world as it was, always, with the delay shrinking to almost nothing for nearby things and stretching to millions of years for distant ones, but never, ever reaching zero. I want to be precise about what this does and does not show, because it would be easy to oversell it. The light delay does not, by itself, prove that the present moment is unreal or that time does not flow. There is still, in this picture, a real present out there, a real current Andromeda doing whatever it is doing right now. All the light delay shows is that you cannot see it, that your knowledge of the universe is always a knowledge of its past. That is a softer claim than the one we are building toward. But it is the perfect doorway because it has already done something important to your intuition. It has pried apart, just a little, the tight bond between now and real. You started this video believing that what is real is what is happening now and that you have direct contact with it. Already that is in trouble. The thing you are in contact with, through your eyes, is never the now. It is a vast spread of different pasts, all equally available, none of them the present, and yet all of them undeniably real. The light from a star that died 1,000 years ago is real light. It is in your eye, doing real work, triggering real signals in your brain. A moment that is, by your own reckoning, deep in the past, is reaching across that gap and physically affecting you right now. The past, it turns out, is not as gone as you assumed. Some of it is still arriving. Sit for a moment longer with the 8-minute-old sunlight, because it carries a lesson that goes deeper than it first appears. When you feel the warmth of the sun on your skin, you are being touched by an event that, by your own ordinary reckoning, lies firmly in the past. The light that is warming you now left the sun before you stepped outside, crossed 93 million miles of empty space, and arrived to do real, present work on your body, all while the moment it came from sat 8 minutes behind you. There is no way to experience the sun as it is right now. The now of the sun is something you can calculate but never feel. What you feel is always the sun of 8 minutes ago, reaching forward across time to warm a person it cannot see in its own present. The past is not a closed and inert thing you have left behind. It is actively arriving, every second, carrying energy, carrying information, doing work in what you call the present. Push this one step further, and a genuinely disorienting thought appears. For very distant things, the question of what is happening there right now starts to lose its grip entirely. You can ask what the Andromeda Galaxy is doing at this exact instant, but you will never be able to check. And as we are about to discover, two equally reasonable people standing right next to you would give different answers to that question, both of them correct. The phrase, "what is happening there now," which feels so solid when you point at the moon, begins to dissolve when you point at a galaxy. The further out you reach, the less the universal present means, until at the largest distances it stops being a fact about the world and becomes a choice about how you are moving. The old starlight in your eyes is the first soft hint of that dissolution. It shows you that the past is still here, still real, still arriving, and once the past refuses to stay safely gone, the whole tidy division of time into real and unreal begins to come loose. And here is the question that hangs in the air as we move to the next step. If the light from the past is this real, this physically present, this capable of reaching across time and touching you, then how confident should you really be that the past has stopped existing? You have been treating now as a thin, bright line, with reality on one side and nothingness on the other. The old starlight pouring into your eyes is the first hint that the line is not where you think it is and maybe not a line at all. To understand why, we have to leave the comfortable territory of light delays, which any astronomer will happily confirm, and step into the stranger country that Albert Einstein opened up in the year 1905, where the trouble is no longer about what you can see, but about the now itself. Part 3. The two rules that broke the universal clock. Everything strange we are going to encounter tonight grows out of two simple statements that Einstein wrote down in the year 1905. They do not look dangerous, they look almost boring. But hidden inside them is the quiet demolition of the universal clock, the single ticking now that you have always imagined, stretching across the whole cosmos. Once you accept these two statements, and the evidence that you must accept them is overwhelming, the universal now cannot survive. The first statement is this: the laws of physics are the same for everyone moving at a steady speed, no matter how fast they are going. Put another way, there is no experiment you can do inside a smoothly moving room that will tell you how fast the room is moving, or even whether it is moving at all. You have felt this yourself on a smooth flight or a quiet train. The way a cabin moving at hundreds of kilometers per hour feels exactly like sitting still, the way a cup of coffee sits on the tray as calmly as it would on your kitchen table. There is no absolute standard of rest in the universe, no fixed stage against which all motion is measured. All steady motion is relative, which is where the whole theory gets its name. The second statement is the one that breaks things. The speed of light in empty space is the same for every observer, no matter how fast they are moving, and no matter how fast the source of the light is moving. Light travels at 299,792,458 meters per second, and that number does not change, ever, for anyone. This sounds modest until you sit with what it actually demands. Imagine a beam of light passing you while you stand still. You measure its speed. Now imagine you chase after that beam at almost the speed of light yourself, racing along behind it. Common sense says the beam should now be pulling away from you slowly, the way a car you are nearly matching on the highway barely drifts ahead. Common sense is wrong. You measure the beam racing away from you at exactly the same speed as before, the full speed of light, as though you had not moved at all. Sit with how impossible that should be. Two people moving at wildly different speeds, measuring the same beam of light, both get exactly the same number. There is no everyday situation like this. If you and I measure the speed of a passing train and you are running toward it while I stand still, we get different answers, obviously. But light refuses to play by those rules. It comes out the same for everyone. And something has to give to make that possible, because speed is just distance divided by time. If everyone measures the same speed for light despite moving differently, then the only way the arithmetic can work is if they do not agree about distance and they do not agree about time. The constancy of light forces space and time themselves to bend so that the speed always comes out right. This is exactly what Einstein found. To keep the speed of light fixed for everyone, moving clocks must run slow, an effect called time dilation, and moving objects must shrink along their direction of motion, an effect called length contraction. The faster you move relative to someone, the the more slowly your clock ticks from their point of view, and the more your ruler shrinks from their point of view. These are not illusions or measurement errors. They are real, and we measure them constantly. They are also small at everyday speeds, which is why you have never noticed them, but they are not zero, and at high speeds they become enormous. I know it is tempting to file all of this under spaceships and science fiction, the kind of thing that only matters near the speed of light and never touches an ordinary life. So let me close that exit before we go further, because the evidence that this is real and woven into your daily existence is not subtle. The satellite navigation in your phone depends on a fleet of clocks orbiting the Earth, and those clocks tick at a different rate than clocks on the ground, partly because they are moving fast, and partly because they sit higher in Earth's gravity. The combined effect comes to about 38 millionths of a second per day. That sounds trivial. It is not. If the system did not correct for it, the errors would pile up at a rate of about 10 kilometers per day, and within hours your navigation would be useless, placing you streets or towns away from where you actually are. Every time the little blue dot finds you correctly, it is a quiet confirmation that time runs at different rates for things moving differently. We have measured this in more direct ways too. In the year 1971, two researchers named Hafele and Keating put atomic clocks on ordinary commercial airplanes and flew them around the world, then compared them with identical clocks that had stayed on the ground. The flown clocks and the ground clocks disagreed, by billionths of a second, in exactly the amounts the theory predicted. Even more vividly, particles called muons rain down on us from the upper atmosphere, created when cosmic rays strike the air far overhead. A muon at rest lasts only about 2 millionths of a second before it falls apart, far too short a life to reach the ground from where it is born. And yet they arrive at the surface in great numbers, every second, all over the world. They survive the trip because they are moving so fast that their internal clocks run slow, stretching their brief lives just long enough to complete a journey that should have been impossible. The sky is raining proof of time dilation onto your head as you sit here. It helps to understand why the speed of light has to behave this way, because it is not an arbitrary rule that the universe imposed on a whim. The speed we call the speed of light is really the speed of cause and effect, the maximum rate at which any influence, any signal, any piece of information can travel from one place to another. Light happens to travel at that speed because light has no mass, but the speed itself is a property of spacetime, a kind of universal speed limit woven into the structure of reality. Once you see it that way, the constancy makes a deeper kind of sense. The speed limit cannot depend on who is measuring it, because if it did, you could use the difference to figure out who was really moving and who was really at rest, and the first rule of relativity says there is no such fact. To keep cause and effect orderly for everyone, no matter how they move, the speed of causality has to come out the same for all of them, and space and time have to flex to make that happen. Sit with how thoroughly this overturns the common sense rule for adding speeds, because that overturning is the whole engine of the strangeness. In ordinary life, speeds add up. If you walk forward at 5 kilometers per hour on a train moving at 100, someone on the ground sees you moving at 105. This works perfectly for trains and walkers and thrown balls, and it is so reliable that you never question it. But it is not exactly true. It is an approximation that works beautifully at low speeds and breaks down completely as you approach the speed of light. Light is where the approximation shatters most visibly. You cannot add anything to the speed of light to get a higher speed, and you cannot subtract your own motion from it to get a lower one. Chase it, flee from it, run alongside it, and it always passes you at the same unchanging rate. The everyday rule for combining speeds, the one your intuition trusts without question, is simply wrong, and it is wrong in a way that forces time itself to bend. So we are not in the realm of speculation. We are standing on some of the most thoroughly tested physics in all of science, confirmed in laboratories, in particle accelerators, in orbiting satellites, in atomic clocks on airplanes, millions of times over. And this thoroughly tested physics has a consequence that we have been circling and are now ready to face directly. If moving clocks run slow, and if there is no universal standard of rest, then there can be no single, universal, now ticking across the cosmos. Different observers, moving differently, do not merely disagree about how fast their clocks run. They disagree about which events happen at the same time. They disagree about what is happening right now. And once that goes, the whole comfortable picture of a present moment sweeping forward through the universe goes with it. That disagreement has a name, the relativity of simultaneity, and it is the hinge on which everything else tonight turns. Part 4. Two people, two nows. Picture a long train car gliding down the tracks at a steady, enormous speed, and picture a passenger sitting exactly in the middle of it. The passenger has a small lamp, and at some moment she switches it on. Light spreads out from the lamp in both directions, toward the front wall of the car and toward the back wall. Now ask a simple question. Does the light reach the front and the back at the same time? For the passenger, sitting at the exact center, the answer is obviously yes. The two walls are equally far from the lamp. The light travels at the same speed in both directions, so it strikes both ends together in the same instant. Two events, the light hitting the front and the light hitting the back, perfectly simultaneous. Now, put someone else on the ground beside the tracks, watching the train rush past, and ask the same question from their point of view. While the light is travelling, the train is moving forward. The back wall of the car is rushing toward the place where the light was emitted, and the front wall is racing away from it. So from the ground observer's point of view, the light heading backward has less distance to cover, because the back wall is coming to meet it, and the light heading forward has farther to go, because the front wall is fleeing from it. Since the light travels at the same fixed speed in both directions, it reaches the back wall first and the front wall slightly later. For the person on the ground, the two events are not simultaneous at all. One happens before the other. Here is the part that should stop you. Neither of them is making a mistake. The passenger is not confused, and the ground observer is not confused. There is no hidden truth that one of them is failing to see. Within the physics, both descriptions are completely, equally correct. The passenger is right that the light hit both ends at the same time. The ground observer is right that it hit the back before the front. Two events that are simultaneous for one observer are not simultaneous for the other, and there is no higher court that can overrule either of them, because the first rule of relativity says that no state of steady motion is more true than any other. Their disagreement is not an error to be corrected. It is built into the structure of reality. You might be tempted to ask which of them is really right, the passenger or the ground observer, as though physics owes us a tiebreaker. It does not, and that refusal is the whole point. There is no preferred observer, no master frame sitting behind the scenes with the correct answer written down. The passenger's frame and the ground observer's frame are exactly equal in standing, and relativity insists, as its founding principle, that no experiment could ever reveal one of them to be the true frame and the other a mere appearance. If such an experiment existed, it would amount to a way of detecting absolute motion, of finding out who is really moving through some fixed cosmic stage. And the first rule of relativity says no such stage exists. So, the disagreement about simultaneity is not a puzzle with a hidden solution. It is a permanent, irreducible feature of how the universe is built. The two observers will go to their graves with different accounts of which event came first, and the universe will never take a side, because there is no side to take. Both accounts are the truth, in full, simultaneously, which is precisely the strange word the whole problem is about. Let that conclusion settle, because it is the quiet earthquake under this entire video. The word simultaneous, the idea of two things happening at the same time, has no single universal meaning. Whether two events happen at the same moment depends on how you are moving. Speed up, slow down, turn around, and you reshuffle what counts as happening together. There is no master list, somewhere out in the universe, of which events are occurring right now. Each observer carries their own list, their own definition of the present moment, and the lists do not match. The universal now, the single sweeping present that you have always imagined connecting everything that exists at this instant, simply is not there. It dissolves the moment you take the constancy of light seriously. You might hope this is a small effect, a tiny technical disagreement about light beams in trains that has no bearing on anything that matters. For everyday speeds and everyday distances, you would be almost right. The mismatch between two people's nows, when they are moving slowly and standing close together, is so small that it makes no practical difference, which is exactly why you have lived your whole life without noticing it. But small is not zero, and the size of the disagreement depends not only on how fast people move relative to each other, but also on how far apart the events are. Over short distances, the gap stays tiny no matter what. But stretch the distance out, across a continent, across a solar system, across the gulf between galaxies, and that same tiny difference in motion gets multiplied by an enormous distance, and the disagreement about what is happening now can swell from billionths of a second into minutes, into days, into years. Let us be very clear about what is and is not getting scrambled here, because this is exactly where people either misunderstand the idea or dismiss it. The disagreement about simultaneity never lets anyone see an effect happen before its cause. The passenger and the ground observer might argue about whether the light hit the front or the back of the car first, but they will never disagree about whether the lamp was switched on before the light arrived. Events that are linked by cause and effect, events close enough together that a signal could pass between them, keep their order for everyone, always. What gets reshuffled is only the order of events that are too far apart in space and too close together in time for any signal to connect them, events that are, in the language we met earlier, in each other's elsewhere. For those events, and only those, there is no universal fact about which came first. Different observers slice them into their nows differently, and none of them is wrong. The universe protects causality fiercely while letting simultaneity float free, and that combination is exactly what makes the block universe possible without making the world incoherent. Think about what this does to the idea of a cosmic present, the imagined snapshot of everything that exists right now across the whole universe. You have always pictured such a snapshot, even if you never said so, a single instant containing every star, every planet, every person, all caught together in the same now. Relativity says that snapshot does not exist as a unique thing. There are countless different snapshots, one for each state of motion, each one a different slice through reality, each one containing a different set of distant events as its present, and no physical fact picks out one of them as the real one. The cosmic now is not a single photograph. It is an entire stack of photographs, all equally valid, tilted at different angles, and the universe has no way to choose between them. The present moment, the one thing you were most certain was shared by everything that exists, turns out to be a personal possession, carried by each observer, agreeing with no one else's once you look far enough away. This is the lever we are about to pull, and it changes everything. If a small difference in how two people move can be multiplied by a large enough distance to produce a large disagreement about the present, then the notion of a single shared now does not just wobble, it shatters. Two people standing in the same spot, doing nothing more dramatic than walking in opposite directions, can have definitions of this very instant that differ by days when applied to a distant enough place. And if their two nows are both equally valid, and if what is happening now is what is real, then we are about to be forced into a conclusion that sounds insane and follows with the cold inevitability of arithmetic. Events that lie in one person's future can lie in another person's present. And if the present is real, then the future is real too. To feel the full weight of that, we need to leave the train behind and walk out onto an ordinary sidewalk under a sky that contains the Andromeda Galaxy. Part 5. The Stranger on the Sidewalk and the Galaxy Overhead. The physicist Roger Penrose gave us the cleanest way to feel how strange this becomes, and it does not require a train or a spaceship. It requires only two people walking past each other on a street. Imagine an ordinary evening, a quiet sidewalk, and two strangers approaching from opposite directions. One is walking north, the other south, each at a normal, unhurried pace, a few kilometers per hour, slower than a jog. At the instant they pass each other, shoulder to shoulder, they are standing in the same place at the same time. And yet, because they are moving in opposite directions, their definitions of now are tilted ever so slightly differently. On the sidewalk, between two strolling people, that tilt is far too small to matter. But the tilt does not stay small when you follow it outward. Carry it across the gulf of space to the Andromeda Galaxy, 2.5 million light-years away, and the tiny difference, multiplied by that staggering distance, opens into a gap of days. Here is what that means, made concrete. Suppose there is a civilization in Andromeda, and suppose its rulers are deciding whether to launch a great fleet toward the Milky Way. For one of our two walkers, the one heading toward Andromeda, this very instant on the sidewalk corresponds to a moment in Andromeda where the fleet has already launched, the decision made, the ships underway. For the other walker, the one heading away from Andromeda, this same instant on the sidewalk corresponds to a moment in Andromeda where the launch has not happened yet, where the rulers are still debating, the future still open. Two people standing in the same spot at the same instant with two different and equally valid versions of what is happening right now, 2.5 million light-years away, separated by days of Andromedan history. Let yourself stand inside the scene for a moment. It is evening, and the street is nearly empty. A faint coolness has settled over everything, and the streetlights are just beginning to glow. Two strangers walk toward each other along the pavement, neither paying the other much attention, two ordinary people at the end of an ordinary day. They draw closer, they pass within arm's reach, and for one shared instant they occupy the same small patch of the world. Nothing happens. They keep walking, their footsteps fade in opposite directions, and the street is quiet again. And the whole time, silently, 2.5 million light-years overhead, inside a galaxy neither of them will ever visit and may never even think about, their two definitions of this exact instant have peeled apart by days. In one walker's present, a fleet has sailed. In the other walker's present, the harbour is still calm. Neither of them feels a thing. The street is empty, the night is ordinary, and the now has quietly come apart over their heads. Now, Penrose was not really making a point about Andromeda, and he was certainly not predicting alien fleets. He chose a faraway galaxy only because the distance makes the effect impossible to wave away. His point was about the present itself. If merely turning around on a sidewalk, the gentlest act imaginable, is enough to move a distant event from your future into your present, then the idea that there is one objective now, one true present moment that the whole universe shares, is in very deep trouble. The events that fall into the walker's present, including the launch of that fleet, must be just as real as anything else the walker would call present, because the walker's now is no less valid than yours or mine. And those very same events sit in the other walker's future. The future of one person is the present of another, and the present is supposed to be real. I want to slow down here and make sure the logic is doing the work and not the drama, because this is the exact point where people either feel the floor tilt or talk themselves out of it. The argument is not that the alien fleet is definitely real, full stop, as a piece of cosmic gossip. The argument is conditional, and it is tight. Whatever you are willing to call real in your own present, you should be willing to call real in the present of someone standing right next to you, because there is no physical fact that makes your state of motion the true one and theirs the false one. The first rule of relativity forbids it. So if their present is as real as yours, and if their present includes events that are still in your future, then those future events are already as real as your present. The reality of the future is not smuggled in. It is forced by the equal standing of every observer's now. It is worth understanding the simple arithmetic that drives the effect, because it removes any sense that this is a trick. The size of the disagreement between two observers about a distant event depends on three things multiplied together: their relative speed, the distance to the event, and a division by the speed of light. When the speed is small, as it is for two walkers, the first factor is tiny. But the distance to Andromeda is so enormous that it more than makes up for the smallness of the speed, and the product comes out to days. This is why the effect stays invisible in ordinary life and only reveals itself across cosmic gulfs. Between two people in the same room, the distance is so small that even at high speed, the disagreement is a vanishing fraction of a second. Stretch the distance to a galaxy, and the same gentle stroll produces days. There is nothing exotic in the calculation, no exotic physics, just a small number multiplied by a staggering one, and the result is that the present comes apart over distance the way a tiny angle, extended far enough, separates two lines by miles. I want to guard against one misreading, because it is the one that lets people dismiss the whole thing. None of this means the two walkers can send messages to Andromeda, or learn anything about it, or do anything to it. The fleet, if it exists, is 2.5 million light-years away, utterly beyond their reach. Neither walker will ever know what is happening there, ever influence it, ever receive word of it in their lifetimes. The disagreement is not about what they can see or affect. It is about what is real, about which events have the status of existing, and that is precisely what makes it so hard to wave away. You cannot escape by saying the difference does not matter, because nobody can act on it. The argument was never about action. It was about existence. And the relativity of simultaneity says that two equally valid observers, standing together, hold two different verdicts about which distant events exist right now, with no fact of the matter to settle between them, which means the comfortable idea that existence comes in one universal slab called the present cannot survive. That is the bridge, and once you have crossed it, there is no easy way back. The relativity of simultaneity, which we measure in laboratories and correct for in satellites, does not stay a quiet technical fact about light beams. Pushed even a little, it becomes a claim about what exists. It says that the sharp line you have always drawn between the real present and the unreal future cannot be drawn in any way that everyone agrees on, and that the most natural way to make sense of the disagreement is to stop drawing the line at all. Past, present, and future stop looking like three different conditions that the universe passes through, one becoming real as another fades away. They start looking like three regions of one thing that simply exists, all at once, the way north and south and the space between them all exist on a map, even though you can only stand in one place. To see that picture clearly, we need the man who first drew the map, a mathematician named Minkowski. Part 6. The universe is not a story, it is a shape. In the year 1908, 3 years after Einstein's two rules, Hermann Minkowski stood before an audience in Cologne and told them that the way they pictured space and time was finished. His words have echoed for more than a century. From now on, he said, space by itself and time by itself were doomed to fade away into mere shadows, and only a union of the two would keep any independent reality. He was not speaking poetically. He had found the mathematics, and the mathematics said that space and time are not two separate things, a stage and a clock, but a single four-dimensional fabric, which we now call spacetime. Einstein had shown that different observers slice up space and time differently. Minkowski showed what they were slicing. Think about why different observers can disagree so much, yet describe the same universe. The answer is that they are taking different slices through one underlying thing. Consider a simple loaf of bread. The loaf is a single solid object, but you can cut it into slices at different angles. Cut it straight across and you get one set of slices. Tilt the knife and you get a different set, each slice containing slightly different bread. Nobody would say the loaf changes depending on how you cut it. The loaf just is. The slices are how a particular cutter divides it up. Minkowski's insight was that space and time work the same way. Space-time is the loaf. Each observer's now, their present moment stretching across space, is a slice through that loaf. Observers moving differently cut the loaf at different angles, so they get different nows, different presents, different sets of events they call simultaneous. But the loaf, the four-dimensional whole, does not change. It simply is. And the slicing is something observers do to it. This is the block universe, and you can already see why it earns the name. Picture your entire life, not as a journey, but as a shape. Every moment you have ever lived and ever will live, laid out along the time direction of the four-dimensional block, like a long thread running through it, your birth at one end, this moment somewhere along the middle. Every breath, every meal, every conversation, every ordinary Tuesday, all of it already there, fixed in place, a complete and unchanging structure. You do not move through this block so much as you are spread out along it, the way a road is spread out across a landscape rather than travelling across it. The road does not flow from one town to another. It simply connects them, existing all at once along its whole length. Your life, in this picture, is the same. It does not flow. It is laid out, entire, from end to end. What makes this more than a pretty metaphor is that the four-dimensional whole turns out to be the thing all observers actually agree on, while the slices are what they argue about. Different observers disagree about how much of an interval between two events is time and how much is space, exactly the way two people tilting a knife disagree about which bread goes in which slice. But there is one combined measure, built from the time separation and the space separation together, with a crucial minus sign tying them, that every observer calculates to be the same. Physicists call it the space-time interval, and its constancy is the bedrock under all the strangeness. The lesson is that the splitting of the world into space and time, into here and there, into now and then, is a perspective, a choice of slicing. The thing that is actually real, the thing that does not depend on your motion, is the four-dimensional block itself. Minkowski gave us one more tool that we will need, and it keeps the block from collapsing into pure fatalism. From any event in space-time, picture the paths that light can take, spreading out into the future and looking the other way, converging from the past. These paths trace out a shape called a light cone. Everything inside your future light cone is a place you could still send a signal to, still reach, still affect. Everything inside your past light cone could have sent a signal to you, could have shaped where you are now. And everything outside both cones is a region Minkowski's framework calls elsewhere, a vast set of events that you cannot affect and that cannot affect you, because not even light is fast enough to bridge the gap in time. Here is the key. It is precisely in this elsewhere region the places you cannot causally touch, that different observers' definitions of now wander freely and disagree. The order of events you can actually influence never gets scrambled. Cause always comes before effect for everyone. What gets reshuffled is only the now of distant things you cannot reach, which is exactly why the block can hold a fixed future without letting anyone change their own past or receive messages from their future. There is a detail in the spacetime interval that deserves a moment, because it is the reason the block holds together so tightly. When you combine the time separation and the space separation between two events, you do not add them the way you would add the sides of a triangle. You subtract because of that minus sign Minkowski found. The time part and the space part pull against each other. This is why an observer who measures more time between two events measures less space, and one who measures more space measures less time in just the right proportion to keep the combined interval fixed. It is a kind of conservation law for spacetime, a quantity that stays constant no matter how you carve the loaf. And the existence of that fixed, observer-independent quantity is the strongest possible sign that the four-dimensional whole is the real object. Different observers are not seeing different universes. They are taking different slices of the same one, and the proof is that they always agree on the interval, the one measurement that belongs to the loaf rather than to any particular cut. Hold the image of your life as a road across a landscape, because it carries a feeling worth pausing on. A road does not experience itself being built mile by mile, with the far end not yet existing while the near end is laid down. The whole road is simply there, winding across the country, every mile of it as real as every other, the starting town and the ending town, and all the quiet stretches between them coexisting at once. When you drive the road, you encounter its miles one after another, and it feels as though each mile comes into being as you reach it and falls away as you leave it. But the road knows better. Every mile was there before you arrived and remains there after you pass. Your life, in the block universe, is a road like that, laid out in full across the four-dimensional landscape, and the sense that you are building it as you go, that the miles ahead do not yet exist, is the same illusion a driver would have if the driver mistook the reach of the headlights for the edge of the world. So, we arrive at a picture both grand and unsettling. The universe is not a story being told, one word at a time, the past spoken and gone, the future not yet written. The universe is a shape, complete, four-dimensional, every event sitting at its own fixed address. The slicing into past and present and future, a matter of how each observer happens to be moving. Einstein himself came to see time this way, and near the end of his life, when his oldest friend Michel Besso died, he wrote to Besso's family that for those who accept physics, the division between past, present, and future is only a kind of persistent illusion. He died a few weeks later. The block universe was not for him a horror. It was, if anything, a strange consolation. But before we can reach the consolation, we have to walk straight into the part that frightens people. Because if the future is already a fixed region of this block, then so is the last moment of your own life. That conclusion does not arrive by force tonight. It arrives by argument, and the argument is next. Part 7. The argument that your future is already real. In the year 1966, a physicist named Dyke took the relativity of simultaneity and turned it into an argument about reality itself, and a year later, in 1967, the philosopher Hilary Putnam arrived at the same conclusion independently. Their reasoning is short enough to hold in your head all at once, which is part of what makes it so hard to escape. We have been circling it. Now let us walk through it slowly, one link at a time, because if the chain holds, the future you think of as open and unwritten is already as real as the moment you are living in. Start with the one thing you are most sure of, Whatever is happening to you right now is real. This instant, the room around you, the breath you are taking, all of it is real, undeniably, by any standard you care to use. That is the first link, and it is not controversial. Nobody doubts the reality of their own present. Now add the second link, which we built carefully over the last two parts. Someone moving relative to you has a different present than you do. Their now, their slice through the block, is tilted compared to yours, and because of that tilt, their present can include events that lie in your future. We saw exactly this on the sidewalk. The walker heading toward Andromeda had, in their present, a fleet that had already launched, an event that for the other walker was still to come. This is not speculation. It follows directly from the relativity of simultaneity, which we measure and confirm every day. Here is the third link, the one that does the real work. The person moving relative to you is not less real than you, and neither is their present. There is no experiment, no fact, no court of appeal that can declare your state of motion the true one and theirs the false one. The first rule of relativity forbids exactly that. So if your present is real, then their present must be every bit as real, because nothing distinguishes the two of you except how you happen to be moving, and motion is relative. Their now has precisely the same claim to reality as yours. Now put the links together and watch where they lead. Your present is real, their present is just as real. Their present contains events that lie in your future. Therefore, those future events, sitting in their present, are already real. And you can keep going, because you can imagine an observer moving in just the right way to bring almost any distant future event into their present. And each of those observers is as real as you, and each of their nows is as real as yours. Stitch together enough of these equally valid presents, and you find that events all across the future and all across the past are as real as the moment you are in. The conclusion lands with the weight of arithmetic. The future already exists. The universe is a block, not a flow, and every part of it is equally, fully real. Pause on how ordinary each link in that chain is, because the strangeness of the conclusion can make you suspect a trick somewhere, and there is none. The first link, that your present is real, is something nobody disputes. The second link, that a moving observer has a different present that can include your future, is not a philosophical guess, but a measured consequence of relativity, the same effect that keeps satellite clocks honest. The third link, that the moving observer is no less real than you, is simply the founding principle of the whole theory, the refusal to grant any state of motion a special status. Every individual step is either obvious or experimentally established. And yet, lined up in order, these unremarkable steps march you straight to a conclusion that overturns your entire sense of time. This is what makes the argument so unsettling and so hard to escape. It does not rest on any exotic assumption you could simply refuse. It rests on the reality of your own present, the measured behavior of moving clocks, and the equality of all observers. And from those three quiet premises, it derives that the future already exists. To reject the conclusion, you must reject one of those three, and each of them is something you almost certainly believe. I have to be honest with you about the status of this argument, because the channel does not deal in overselling. The Reitdijk and Putnam argument is genuinely debated. Philosophers have spent more than half a century probing one particular link, the idea that being real can be passed along from one observer's present to another's like a baton, that reality is something every frame must agree on across the whole of spacetime. Some argue that reality is local, that it only makes sense to speak of what is real here and now, at a single point, and that you cannot chain it across distant events the way the argument needs. That is a serious response, and it keeps the door open a crack. But notice what it costs. To resist the conclusion, You have to give up the simple idea that there is one definite collection of things that are real right now, the same for everyone. You either accept that the future is as real as the present, or you accept that the word real has no single universal meaning across space. Both of those are radical. The comfortable middle option, a single objective present, marching forward and bringing reality into being as it goes, is the one thing the physics will not let you keep. Let me put the locality objection in its strongest form, so you can weigh it fairly rather than taking my word for the conclusion. A careful critic says this: reality is not a single global list of everything that exists across all of space at once. Reality is local. It only makes sense to speak of what is real at a particular point, here, where you actually are. The reason the chain seems to work, the critic argues, is that it quietly assumes you can take the realness of an event over there, in another observer's distant present, and import it into your own list of what exists. But if there is no global list, only local facts, then you never had the right to build that bridge in the first place. Each observer has their own local present, real for them at their point, and there is simply no master inventory of the universe that all of these have to fit into. On this view, the future is not real for you, and the argument fails because it asked a question: what exists globally right now that has no answer? This is a respectable position, and I will not pretend it has been crushed. But feel the cost of it, because the cost is the real lesson. To block the conclusion that your future already exists, the critic has to abandon something you have always taken for granted: the idea that there is a definite, shared collection of things that are real right now, the same for everyone, everywhere. You are left with two doors and no third one. Behind the first door, reality is global and shared, in which case the chain runs and the future already exists. Behind the second door, reality is local and fractured, with no universal present and no global inventory of what exists, in which case the future is not real for you, but neither is anything else that is not right where you are standing. Either the future is as real as your present, or the word real shatters into 1,000 local pieces with no whole. What you cannot do, what relativity will not permit, is keep the cozy picture of one universal present sweeping forward and granting existence as it goes. That door is bricked up. The flowing now you started the night, believing in, is gone either way. So let us hold the strongest version honestly, while remembering the dispute. The most natural reading of the most well-tested physics we have is that the future is not a region of unreality waiting to be made real. It is already there, fixed, complete, as real as this sentence. Every tomorrow you have not yet lived is sitting in the block at its own address, no less actual than today. And that includes, unavoidably, the tomorrows you would rather not think about. We have been building toward one event in particular, the one the whole video is named for, and we can no longer keep it at a distance. If the future is real, then there is a specific event somewhere in the block that is the last moment of your life. It is not coming, it is there. To understand what that does and does not mean, we have to look straight at it. Part 8. The moment of your death is already there. Here is the sentence the whole video has been walking toward, and I am going to say it plainly, because softening it would be a kind of lie. If the block universe is right, then the moment of your death has, in the only sense physics can give the word, already happened. It exists. It sits at a particular set of coordinates in the four-dimensional block, a fixed point in spacetime, as real as the moment you are in right now. It is not ahead of you, waiting to occur. It is simply located, the way a distant city is located, whether or not you have ever driven there. Your death is not approaching. It is already there. I want to take the fear out of that as we go, not by denying it, but by looking at it directly, because the fear comes mostly from a picture that the block universe quietly dismantles. The ordinary terror of death runs on the idea of the flow. You imagine yourself being carried down the river toward a waterfall, the edge getting closer with every second, an ending rushing up to swallow the bright moving now that is you. The dread lives in the approach, in the sense of something coming for you that you cannot outrun. But the block universe says the river is not flowing, nothing is rushing toward you. The waterfall is not getting closer, because closer is a notion that belongs to the flow, and the flow is the very thing in question. In the block, the last moment of your life is not an event speeding toward your present. It is a place in the landscape, fixed and quiet, that your life happens to reach, the way a road reaches its end, not by being chased there, but simply by being a road of a certain length. Let yourself look at it the way you might look at a map of a journey you have not finished. Picture the whole of spacetime spread out as a finished landscape, and picture your own life as a single thread running through it, beginning at your birth and ending, somewhere, at your last breath. Find that far end of the thread. Do not flinch from it. It is there, a definite point, the moment your particular pattern of being alive comes to its close. It is not rushing at you out of the dark. It is sitting exactly where it sits, complete, unchanging, no more menacing than the far edge of a country you have not yet travelled to. The light of your attention has not reached it yet, the way you have not yet driven to a city that nonetheless exists right now, with its streets and its lights, whether you are there or not. The last moment of your life is like that city, already real, already there, simply waiting at its own address in a structure that does not move. There is something worth noticing about the word already, which I keep using and which does a lot of quiet work. To say your death has already happened is not to say it happened in your past, in some moment you have lived through and forgotten. It lies in your future, at the far end of your thread, well ahead of where your awareness sits tonight. The word already is not pointing backward in your personal time. It is pointing at the structure as a whole, at the fact that the event exists, fully formed, in the block, regardless of whether your travelling awareness has reached it. This is why the claim sounds paradoxical and is not. Your death is in your future and already real at the same time, because future and already are answering two different questions. Future tells you where the event sits relative to your present awareness. Already tells you that the event exists at all, that it is a real part of the structure rather than a blank waiting to be filled. In the block, every future event is already real in exactly this sense, and your death is simply the one you most wish were not. Notice what this does to the strange asymmetry we feel about the two ends of a life. We treat birth and death completely differently, though the block treats them the same. Your birth you regard as fixed and settled and harmless, a real event in the past that has already happened and can never be undone. Your death you regard as a looming unreality, a darkness ahead, the great approaching threat. But in the block universe, there is no difference in their status. Both are fixed events at fixed coordinates. Both already exist. The only thing that makes one feel settled and the other feel like a sword hanging over you is the direction in which the small light of your awareness happens to be travelling along the thread. Strip away that one accident of perspective, and your death has exactly the same quiet, finished, harmless reality as your birth. It is not a waiting catastrophe. It is the other end of a thread that already exists in full. Stay inside the landscape image a little longer, because there is a quiet comfort hidden in it that most people miss on the first pass. When you picture a city you have not yet visited, you do not feel dread about it. You know it is there, going about its life, its streets full and its lights on, and the fact that you will arrive there someday does not poison the days before you arrive. It simply sits at its place on the map, neither threatening nor rushing, a destination among destinations. The block universe invites you to hold the last moment of your life with something closer to that feeling. It is a place on the map of your existence, real, located, waiting at its own coordinates, and the days between here and there are not made of dread leaking backward from it. They are their own moments, each one fixed and real and complete in itself, each one a place on the map just as much as the ending is. The ending does not reach back and stain them. It only sits where it sits. Consider, too, how oddly this reframes the strange fact that you cannot remember your own death the way you cannot remember your own birth. In the flowing picture, the reason you cannot remember your death is obvious and grim. It has not happened yet. It lies in the unreal future. But in the block, the reason is different and far less grim. You cannot remember your death for the same reason you cannot remember a city you have not driven to, not because it does not exist, but because the small light of your awareness has not yet travelled to that part of the structure. The moment is there, fully real, fully formed, sitting at the end of your thread. Your awareness simply has not arrived at it, and when it does, there will be no one left, in that moment, to carry the memory onward, which is its own kind of mercy. The ending is not an abyss you are falling toward. It is the last bead on a thread that was always complete, and the thread does not feel its own end as a catastrophe. It simply stops being thread, quietly, at the place where it was always going to stop. I am not going to pretend this dissolves all fear, because it does not, and a video that claimed otherwise would not be honest. The end of a life carries grief and loss that no diagram of spacetime can argue away, and the people who love you will feel the gap where you were. But the particular flavour of dread that comes from the approach, from the sense of an ending hunting you down through time, has had its foundation pulled out from under it. There is no approach in the block. There is no hunting. There is only a structure that already contains every moment you will ever live, including the last, all of them equally real, none of them rushing anywhere. Your death is not a thing that is going to happen to you out of a dark and open future. It is a place that already exists in a landscape that was never moving. It is not approaching, it is already there. And here, just as the conclusion threatens to settle into something cold, the most stubborn objection in your mind is surely rising up to fight it, and it deserves a full and fair hearing. Because whatever the equations say, you can feel the flow. You can feel time moving right now, this second, carrying you forward whether you like it or not. The block universe can be as elegant as it likes, but it seems to be flatly contradicted by the most immediate fact of your existence, the undeniable sensation that time passes. If the universe is really a frozen four-dimensional shape, then why, in the name of everything obvious, does it so powerfully feel like a river? That objection is the strongest one there is, and the answer to it is one of the most beautiful things in all of physics. Part 9. But time obviously moves, doesn't it? The objection is so strong that it is worth stating in its full force before we answer it. You do not merely believe time passes, you experience it passing, constantly, with an immediacy that nothing else in your life can match. Coffee cools, ice melts, your body ages. You remember this morning, but not this evening. Everywhere you look, time has an unmistakable direction, an arrow pointing from past to future, and you are being carried along it. Surely a frozen block, a shape where every moment exists equally and nothing flows, cannot be reconciled with something so plain. Surely the felt direction of time is proof that time really does move. This is where most people get off the train, and it is exactly the right place to slow down and look carefully, because the answer turns the objection into the most powerful evidence for the block instead of against it. Begin with a fact that almost nobody is taught, and that genuinely shocked physicists when they first faced it. The fundamental laws of physics do not care about the direction of time. Write down the equations that govern how particles move, how forces act, how electricity and magnetism behave, how the quantum world evolves, and you find that they work exactly as well running backward as forward. Film a single particle colliding with another and play the film in reverse, and the reversed film shows a collision that is also perfectly allowed by the laws. There is nothing in the deep equations that stamps a difference between earlier and later. At the level of the fundamental rules, the universe is very nearly symmetric in time. The arrow you feel so strongly is simply not written into the basic laws of nature. So, where does the arrow come from? It comes from one law, and it is a law of a very different kind. It is the second law of thermodynamics, which says that the total disorder of an isolated system, a quantity physicists call entropy, tends to increase. Disorder grows. A drop of ink spreads through water and never gathers back into a drop. Heat flows from hot to cold and never the reverse. A shattered cup never reassembles. The second law is the one place in physics where past and future are genuinely different, and it is statistical, not fundamental. It is about overwhelming probability, not ironclad rule. There are vastly, unimaginably more ways for the molecules of a cup to be scattered across the floor than to be arranged as an intact cup. So when you wait, you almost always find more scattering, more disorder, more entropy. The arrow of time, the one direction we feel so surely, is the direction in which disorder increases. It is worth pausing on how counterintuitive the time symmetry of the laws really is, because most people have never been told it and find it hard to believe. Take any ordinary process that seems to have an obvious direction, a drop of cream swirling into coffee, and look at the individual molecules. Each molecule is just bouncing around, colliding, following laws that work identically forwards and backwards. There is no molecule that knows which way time is supposed to go. If you could film a single collision between two molecules and show it to a physicist, they could not tell you whether the film was running forwards or backwards, because both directions obey the same laws perfectly. The arrow only appears when you stop watching individual molecules and start watching the crowd, because a crowd has overwhelmingly more ways to be spread out than to be neatly gathered. The directionality of time is a fact about crowds and probabilities, not about the underlying motions. It emerges from the statistics of enormous numbers of particles, none of which individually distinguishes past from future. The arrow is real, but it is a property of bulk and number, painted onto laws that are themselves perfectly even-handed about which way time runs. The great physicist Arthur Eddington gave this its name. He spoke of the arrow of time, and he located it precisely here, in the relentless increase of entropy, and not in any flow of time itself. Ludwig Boltzmann, decades earlier, had found the equation that ties disorder to probability. The relation between entropy and the number of ways a system can be arranged, and that equation is carved on his tombstone in Vienna, a single line of mathematics standing over a grave. What Boltzmann and Eddington together give us is a way to feel a direction in time without there being any flow of time at all. The block does not need to move for entropy to be lower at one end and higher at the other. The arrow is a property of how the contents of the block are arranged along the time direction, not evidence that the block is sliding past you. But this only pushes the question back one step, to a genuinely strange place, and the channel will not pretend the strangeness away. If disorder is always increasing, then it was lower yesterday and lower still the day before, and following that all the way back, the universe must have begun in a state of extraordinarily low disorder, an almost impossibly ordered starting condition about 13.8 billion years ago. Physicists call this assumption the past hypothesis. The entire arrow of time, every memory you have, every aging cell, every cooling cup, ultimately traces back to the fact that the universe started in that exquisitely ordered state and has been running down ever since. We do not know why it began that way. It is one of the genuinely open mysteries, a fact we must simply assume to explain the world we see, with no agreed account of where it came from. The direction of time is real, in the sense that the arrow points one way, but it is not a current carrying you forward. It is a slope in the arrangement of the block, set by a beginning we cannot yet explain. It is worth dwelling on just how staggering the required orderliness of the early universe was, because the number gives the past hypothesis its weight. When physicists try to estimate how special the starting condition of the universe had to be, how finely ordered, the odds against it arising by chance are so extreme that the number defying them cannot be written in ordinary terms. The early universe was not slightly more ordered than today. It was ordered to a degree that, by the blind statistics of disorder, should essentially never happen. And yet it did. Or rather, it sits there at one end of the block, a state of breathtaking order, and the entire arrow of time, every difference you feel between past and future, flows downhill from that one improbable corner. Everything you call memory, everything you call aging, every cup that breaks and never mends, is a consequence of the universe having begun in that exquisitely tidy state and sliding, ever since, toward the overwhelming disorder that probability prefers. The arrow is not a current. It is a slope, and the slope was set at the beginning. Notice how this reframes your own sense of moving through time, because it places the source of the feeling outside of time itself. You feel yourself moving from past to future, but what you are actually registering, moment to moment, is the steady increase of disorder around you and inside you, the one-way flow of heat, the accumulation of memories that are themselves physical records, ordered traces left in your brain that could only have formed in the direction of increasing entropy. Your sense of the past being fixed and the future being open is, at bottom, your sense of which direction has more order behind it and more disorder ahead. The arrow you feel is real, but it is pointing along a fixed structure, not dragging you through a moving one. It is the difference between a slope on a frozen hillside and a river running down it. The hillside has a definite downhill direction without anything flowing at all. The block has a definite past to future direction set by entropy without anything flowing at all. Now turn the objection back on itself and feel it become evidence. You said the obvious flow of time proves the block must be wrong. But we have just seen that the felt direction of time needs no flow at all to exist. It needs only entropy increasing along the time axis of a static block anchored by a low entropy past. The reason you remember the past and not the future, the reason you age, the reason the cup shatters and never mends, is the same reason, and only that reason, the statistical slope of disorder, and it sits perfectly comfortably inside a four-dimensional shape that does not move. The flow was never required to explain any of the things you pointed to. Every piece of evidence you offered for the moving river is fully explained by a frozen block with a slope in it, which leaves one stubborn thing still standing, the only thing the entropy story does not touch, and it is the strangest of all. Not the cooling coffee, not the aging body, not the one-way memory, but the raw inner sensation, right now, of time actually passing. If the block does not flow, where is that coming from? The answer is going to move the river out of the universe and into you. Part 10. The universe does not unfold, you crawl through it. The mathematician Hermann Weyl, who understood relativity as deeply as anyone alive in his time, wrote a single sentence that may be the most honest description of the block universe ever set down. The objective world, he said, simply is, it does not happen. Only to the gaze of my consciousness, crawling upward along the line of my life, does a section of this world come to life as a fleeting image that continuously changes in time. Read that again slowly, because it contains the whole resolution. The world does not happen, it is. And the happening, the flow, the sense of moments coming to life one after another is not in the world, it is in the gaze, it is in you. Consider what Weyl is actually proposing, because it is a precise claim, not a poetic flourish. The four-dimensional block is laid out. complete and motionless, every moment of your life already there, fixed in place. Nothing about the block moves. But your consciousness is not spread out evenly across the whole of your life like the block itself. Your awareness is somehow associated with one place along the thread at a time, lit up at this moment, and the contents of that moment include memories of the moments before it and anticipations of the moments after. So from the inside, from within any single lit moment, it feels exactly as though you have arrived here from a past and are heading into a future. The feeling of flow is what it is like to be a conscious moment embedded in a block, carrying within it the traces of the moments behind. The river is not the universe moving. The river is what a static block feels like from the inside of one of its moments. Let yourself sit inside Whale's image, because it is one of the strangest and most beautiful things you will ever try to picture. Imagine the entire four-dimensional world lying perfectly still, frozen from beginning to end, your whole life within it, like a long thread of unmoving beads, every moment already strung and fixed, none of them going anywhere. And now imagine a small traveling glow, the light of your own awareness, moving along that thread, lighting up one bead, then the next, then the next. Where the glow falls, that moment feels like now, vivid and present and alive. Behind the glow, the beads it has already passed feel like memory. Ahead of it, the beads it has not yet reached feel like the unknown future, but the beads themselves never move. They were always there, all of them, the whole thread strung complete before the glow began its travel. It is not the river that flows. It is the small light moving over water that was always perfectly still. The river was never the water. The river was the boat. This is the deepest inversion in the whole video, so let it land fully. You began tonight certain that time flows and that you were being carried along by it, a passenger on a moving current. What the physics and Whale's reading together suggest is the reverse. The current is not moving, you are. Or, more precisely, the felt motion is not a property of time at all, but a property of consciousness, moving its attention along a fixed structure, the way your eye moves along a sentence that is already fully printed on the page. The words do not flow into existence as you read them. They are all there at once, the whole sentence, the whole paragraph, the whole page. The flow you feel is your gaze travelling across them. The most basic, undeniable feature of being alive, the passage of time, may be located not in the universe, but in the act of being a conscious creature, reading its own life, one moment at a time. Let yourself feel how this dissolves the last and hardest piece of the puzzle, the piece that entropy alone could not touch. We saw that the slope of disorder explains the cooling coffee and the aging body and the one-way memory, all the outward signs of time's direction, without any flow. But there was one thing left over, the raw inner sensation of nowness moving, the felt passage itself, and it seemed to demand a moving present even after everything else had been explained. Whale's reading is what closes that gap. The felt passage is not an extra fact about the universe that the block leaves unexplained. It is what the block looks like from the inside of a conscious moment. A moment of awareness, embedded in the structure, containing memories of earlier moments and anticipations of later ones, cannot help but feel as though it has come from a past and is moving toward a future, because that is the shape of its own contents. The flow is not added to the block. The flow is the block, experienced from within one of its lit points. Nothing needs to move for the feeling of movement to exist. Think about a single frame of a film to make this concrete, because the analogy is almost exact. A strip of film contains thousands of still frames, each one frozen, none of them moving, the whole story laid out motionless along the strip. When the projector runs, a light passes through the frames one at a time, and on the screen a world springs into motion. People walk and speak and time seems to flow. But nothing on the film strip ever moved. The motion was never in the frames. It was in the passing of the light across them. The block universe is the film strip, every moment of your life a frozen frame already there along its length. Your consciousness is the light of the projector falling on one frame at a time, and the flow of time is the motion that appears on the screen of your experience as the light moves across frames that themselves never stir. The film does not become real frame by frame as the light reaches it. It was always there, all of it, the ending already printed while the beginning plays. There are hints of this even in the ordinary science of perception, which is worth noting, so this does not sound like pure speculation. The present moment you feel is not actually a knife-edge instant. The philosopher William James called it the specious present, and modern neuroscience agrees that what your brain serves up as now is really a smear of about 2 to 3 seconds, a small window that the mind stitches together out of incoming signals and recent memory to produce the seamless sense of a flowing present. The now you inhabit is, in a real and measurable way, a construction assembled by the brain, not a direct readout of a cosmic present moment. If even the felt width of now is something your brain builds, then it is not such a leap to suppose that the felt movement of now is built too, that the entire sensation of time passing is the signature of a consciousness crawling, as Whale said, along the line of its own life. We have to be careful and admit the edge of our knowledge here, because this is where physics hands off to questions nobody has fully answered. Exactly how and why consciousness produces the feeling of flow is not settled. The hard problem of how any physical process gives rise to inner experience at all sits underneath this and remains unsolved. So the honest statement is this: the physics describes a block that does not flow. The felt flow of time is real as an experience, but appears to be a feature of the experiencer, not of the universe, generated by a mind moving its awareness along a fixed structure. The river of time, as far as our best understanding can tell, was never out there in the world. It was always in here, in the gaze, in you. And that relocation from the cosmos into the self is about to do something to the question of your death and to your freedom that we now have to face. Part 11. If it's already written, does anything I do matter? There is a fear that has probably been building in you for the last several parts, and it is time to face it head on, because if we leave it unanswered, the whole block universe collapses into despair. The fear goes like this: if the future already exists, fixed and complete, if every moment of my life is already there in the block, including my death, then nothing I do can change anything. My choices are an illusion. The outcome is already set. I am a passenger watching a film that has already been shot, and my sense of deciding, of acting, of mattering is a cruel joke. This is the leap to fatalism, and it is the single most common mistake people make about the block universe, and it is wrong. Let me show you carefully why. The error hides in one small word, the word change. You ask whether you can change the future, and when the block says no, you hear a sentence of helplessness. But look closely at what changing the future would even mean. To change the future, there would have to be two futures, the one that was going to happen and the new one you swapped in for it, with some moment of time at which you reached in and made the substitution. That picture only makes sense inside the flow, where the future is a blank waiting to be written and you are the pen. In the block, there are not two futures. There is one, and your choices are not an alternative to it. Your choices are part of it. The future is fixed, yes, but it is fixed in part because of what you decide, not in spite of it. Your deliberation, your weighing of options, your final choice, all of it is woven into the block as a real cause of what follows. You do not change the future. You are one of the reasons the future is what it is. Hold the difference between fixed and forced, because everything turns on it. A future that is forced would happen no matter what you did, your choices irrelevant, the outcome bearing down on you regardless. That is fatalism, and the block does not say that. A future that is fixed, in the block universe sense, is a future that includes your choices as genuine links in the chain that produces it. Take your deliberation out of the block, and the future would be different, because the future grows partly out of that deliberation. Your agency is not erased by the fixity. Your agency is one of the things that is fixed, precisely because it does real work. The fact that the whole pattern already exists does not mean your part of the pattern is idle. It means your part of the pattern is permanent. What you do matters exactly as much as it ever did. It is simply also already real. Think of it the way you think about your own past, where this is obvious. The choices you made yesterday are now fixed, settled, unchangeable. You cannot reach back and alter them. And yet you would never say that because yesterday is fixed, your choices yesterday did not matter, that you were a helpless passenger. Of course they mattered. They shaped where you are now. They were real decisions with real consequences, and the fact that they are now permanent does not drain them of meaning. It gives them their weight. The block universe simply says that your future choices have that same status, fixed and meaningful at once, real decisions that genuinely shape what follows, that happen to already be part of a structure that exists in full. Permanence is not the enemy of meaning. It may be the only thing that gives meaning a place to last. There is a sharper way to see why fixity does not mean helplessness, and it comes from thinking about what a prediction would require. Suppose someone told you that because the future is fixed, you might as well do nothing, because whatever will happen regardless. Notice the hidden assumption that the outcome is somehow detached from your action, floating free, set in place by something other than you. But the block does not work that way. In the block, the outcome is fixed together with the actions that produce it, as a single woven whole. There is no version of the structure where you sit back and do nothing, and yet the same things still happen, because if you sat back and did nothing, the structure would simply be a different structure, with different consequences flowing from your inaction. You cannot test the fatalist's claim, because the only way to find out what happens if you do nothing is to actually do nothing, and then you have acted, and the future that follows is the future your inaction produced. The fixed future is not waiting to happen to you regardless of your choices. It is the future your choices, among other things, bring about. Think of an actor in a play whose script is fully written because it sharpens the point. You might say the actor has no freedom. Every line set in advance, every move blocked, nothing left to chance. But that is the wrong picture of the block, because in a play there is a script existing separately from the performance, written first, imposed from outside. The block has no separate script. There is only the performance itself, and it writes nothing in advance, because there is no advance, no earlier time at which the future was decided before being lived. The future is fixed not because something decided it ahead of time, but simply because it is there, all at once, the deciding and the living being the same act, viewed as part of the whole. Your choices are not following a script written before you. They are the script, and the writing and the performing are one thing, happening at their own places in a structure with no outside author and no earlier room in which your fate was sealed without you. Now I owe you honesty about the fact that not everyone accepts the block, because the channel does not present one view as the only adult option. There are serious thinkers who resist it, and their alternatives deserve naming. There is presentism, the common-sense view that only the present moment is truly real, the past gone, and the future not yet existing. To hold it against relativity, presentists usually have to propose a true, privileged present that the physics simply cannot detect, a hidden cosmic now, and the physicist John Stuart Bell was sympathetic to a version of that idea. It is consistent, but it pays for itself with something undetectable. There is the growing block view, in which the past and present are real and fixed, but the future genuinely does not exist yet, reality accreting moment by moment, the block growing at its leading edge. And there are the deeper programs in quantum gravity, where time may not be fundamental at all. When physicists try to write the equation for the quantum state of the entire universe, the most famous attempt, the Wheeler and DeWitt equation, comes out with no time variable in it whatsoever, describing a universe that does not evolve, but simply is. Some, like Julian Barber, take this to mean time is an illusion built from a landscape of static moments. Others, like Carlo Rovelli, argue time is emergent and thermal, not fundamental. The logician Kurt Gödel even found, as a birthday gift to Einstein, a solution to the equations of general relativity describing a rotating universe in which you could travel into your own past, which he took as proof that objective time is not built into physics at all. What strikes me about that whole list of alternatives is the direction they all point, and it is worth pausing on. Not one of them rescues the simple picture you started with, the universal present sweeping forward and bringing reality into being. Presentism survives only by hiding an undetectable now. The growing block keeps a real becoming but struggles to say which slice is the leading edge when relativity denies a universal present. And the quantum gravity programs do not restore the flow. They make time even less fundamental than the block does, suggesting it might be an approximation, a high-level appearance that dissolves when you look closely enough. Whichever way the truth turns out to lie, the flowing river you began with does not come back. The debate is not between the block and the river. The debate is over just how much stranger than the river the truth is going to be. And in every version, the thing you feared, the cold and forced and meaningless future, fails to appear, because in every version, your choices remain real, which means we can finally turn with the fear set down to the gift that has been hiding inside the block this whole time. Part 12. What the block universe is quietly trying to give you. We have spent this whole night following the physics into a place that, on its face, sounds like the bleakest idea imaginable. Your death already exists. The future is fixed. Time does not flow. If you had heard only those 3 sentences and nothing else, you would be forgiven for thinking this was the coldest picture of reality ever proposed. But we did not hear only those sentences. We followed the argument all the way down, and at the bottom of it, waiting quietly, is something that looks much more like a consolation than a sentence. Because the block universe does not only fix your death, it fixes everything. And once you see what else it holds permanently in place, the whole picture turns. Consider what the flow of time, the picture you started with, actually does to a life. In the river model, every moment you live is destroyed the instant after it happens. The present is real for a flicker, and then it is gone, dropped into a past that has stopped existing, erased, unreachable, lost. Your happiest afternoon, the sound of a voice you loved, the face of someone who is no longer here, all of it real for one fleeting moment, and then annihilated forever by the advancing now. That is the true cruelty of the flowing river, though we rarely name it. It does not only carry you toward death, it destroys every moment of your life as fast as you live it, leaving you with nothing but fading memories of a past that the universe itself has thrown away. The block universe says that is not what happens. In the block, nothing is destroyed. No moment is erased. Every instant you have ever lived is still there, fixed at its own address in the 4-dimensional structure, exactly as real as it ever was. The afternoon you remember is not gone. It is still happening, in its place, complete and untouched. The light slanting through the window just as it did, the voice still speaking, the warmth still real. You cannot return to it, because your awareness only travels its own thread in one direction, but it has not been thrown away. It stands where it always stood. The person you have lost is not erased from existence. Their life, every moment of it, still occupies its stretch of the block, real and permanent, the laughter and the ordinary mornings and the goodbye, all still there, not as memory, but as a part of the unchanging structure of what is. Nothing you have loved is gone. It is not approaching, and it is not receding. It is already there, and it always will be. This is the same physics that frightened you, turned to face the other way. The fixity of the future, which felt like a trap when we aimed it at your death, is the fixity of the past, which becomes a refuge when you aim it at everything you feared losing. You cannot have one without the other. A block that holds your death permanently in place is a block that holds every good moment permanently in place too, with exactly the same certainty, by exactly the same logic. The structure that says your ending already exists says, in the very same breath, that your beginning still exists, and your childhood still exists, and every person and every hour you thought time had stolen from you still exists, fixed, real, safe from the erasing current you imagined. The river you feared was carrying you toward an ending was also, in the old picture, destroying everything behind you. The block does neither. The block keeps it all. There is an old worry that the block universe makes life meaningless, and we are now in a position to see that it has things exactly backwards. The worry assumes that meaning requires impermanence, that things matter precisely because they are fleeting, because they can be lost. But look closely at that assumption, and it falls apart. The flowing river, the picture that promises meaning through impermanence, actually delivers the opposite, a universe that destroys everything it makes, that grants each moment a flicker of reality only to annihilate it, that leaves nothing behind but the slow erosion of memory. There is no permanence in the river for anything to mean. The block reverses this completely. In the block, nothing that ever mattered is unmade. The love you have given, the work you have done, the moments you were fully alive, are not erased the instant after they occur. They are written permanently into the structure of what exists, fixed at their coordinates, real forever. If meaning needs anything to rest on, it needs exactly this, a place where what mattered stays mattered, where the good is not perpetually destroyed by the advance of an indifferent present. The block does not drain meaning from your life. It is the only picture that lets your life keep what it earns. So we come back, at the very end, to the river and the boat we started with. You began tonight certain that you were floating down a river of time, carried from a vanishing past toward an oncoming death, every moment destroyed behind you and the end rushing up ahead. The physics has slowly, patiently taken that picture apart. The river was never moving. The water was always perfectly still, the whole of it, from your first moment to your last, laid out complete in a structure that does not flow. The only thing that ever moved was the small light of your attention, sliding along a thread that was already whole. Your death is not approaching, because nothing approaches in a river that does not flow. It is already there, a quiet fixed point at the far end of your thread, no more menacing than the far edge of a country you have not yet walked across. And everything you love is already there too, just as fixed, just as permanent, never destroyed, never lost, waiting at its own address in a universe that, whatever else it is, does not throw anything away. There is a way of living with this idea that has nothing to do with physics equations and everything to do with attention, and it is worth naming before we close. If every moment you live is permanent, fixed forever at its own place in the block, then every moment you live is also, in a sense, eternal. The ordinary afternoon you are only half paying attention to right now will never stop being real. It will stand at its coordinate in the structure for as long as the structure exists, which is to say always. This is a strange and quiet argument, for for paying attention to your life, for being present in the moments you are actually in. Because in the block universe, there are no throwaway moments. Each one is being carved permanently into the shape of reality, not as a memory that will fade, but as an unchanging part of what is. The block does not only hold your death and your losses in place, it holds this moment in place, the one you are in right now, forever, exactly as you are living it. What you do with it is what will always have been done with it. Consider how this changes the weight of the people who are still with you and the moments you are still sharing. In the flowing picture, there is a quiet desperation underneath every good time, the knowledge that it is being destroyed even as it happens, slipping into a past that will soon stop existing, leaving only fading copies in memory. The block lifts that desperation. The good time you are having is not being destroyed, it is being made permanent. The conversation, the laughter, the ordinary evening with someone you love is not water running through your fingers. It is being set, fixed, written into the unchanging structure of what exists, where it will stand forever, untouched, real. You do not have to clutch at it to keep it from vanishing, because it is not vanishing. It is becoming, at this very moment, one more permanent feature of a universe that does not erase. That is not a reason to grieve the passing of time. It may be a reason to stop believing in the passing at all. We do not get to know with certainty that this is the final truth. Physics has handed us the geometry, the relativity of simultaneity, the block that falls out of it, the arrow that needs no flow, the consciousness that may be the only thing that moves. It has not handed us the last word. The deepest question of all, whether time truly passes or whether we are the only passage there is, remains open, one of the genuine mysteries still standing at the edge of what we understand. But of all the ways a person might learn to hold their own ending, and the endings of the people they love, there are worse ones than this. To know that nothing is rushing toward you, to know that nothing has been taken away, to know that every moment you have lived is still standing, exactly where it happened, in a structure that does not move. The present moment you are in right now, this quiet one, here at the end of a long night of thinking, will never actually go anywhere. It will stay, fixed and real, at its own place in the block, long after the small light of your attention has travelled on, and so will every moment that ever mattered to you. Not approaching, not receding, already there.